In this video, guys, I'm going to show you how to cut and sew this beautiful gown. Let's get into it. So I'm working with my Ankara print for this particular tutorial, and this fabric is on a fold. And the first thing I went ahead to do was to mark 1.5 inch for my zip allowance. I know all of you will be like, Ada, why 1.5 inch? Because my ancestors whispered to me that I should mark 1.5 inch this time, so I'm marking 1.5 inch. Okay, so now after marking 1.5 inch across the entire length of my fabric, the next thing I went ahead to do was to connect my markings together. You guys, if I sound funny, I have a flu. I'm battling kata, so I'm just trying to put out this content for you guys because it's long overdue. Okay, so now after connecting my lines together, the next thing I went ahead to do was to fold my zip allowance and secure it, because me, I always like my zip allowance to be out of sight when I am cutting, when I am sewing. You guys understand? Yeah. So after folding my zip allowance, I went ahead to fold my fabric again. So here I have 4 layers, so 2 for front and 2 for the back. Okay, so now I went ahead to draw my starting line, my bust point line, my nipple point line, my under bust point line, my hip line. All those lines is what I went ahead to draw here. Okay, so you guys know that from the shoulder downwards 8 inches is bust point line. The other measurements are based on your measurement. So that's my starting line. Okay, this is my bust point line at 8 inches, my nipple point line at 9.5 inches, my under bust line at 14 inches, my half blouse line at 16 inches, and my hip line. Okay, so now the first thing I went ahead to do is I want to start marking my neckline now. Okay, so I took my neck depth at 4 inches and my neck width at 4 inches. Now mind you, my half blouse line, okay, my shoulder to half blouse point is 16 inches. Okay, but I came down by half an inch because we're going to have a cut there. Okay, and so if your half shoulder to half blouse is 14, mark 15 because we're going to cut. Okay, so now the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark my shoulder point at 8.5 inches. I also did the same thing at my bust point, so I have a straight line. Okay, so I went ahead to draw a straight line. Now the next thing I went ahead to do, I went ahead to slant my shoulder by half an inch. So after slanting my shoulder half an inch by half an inch, you guys know that we always do this because our shoulders are not straight. Okay, so the next thing I went ahead to do now was to insert my armhole curve or my armhole. Okay, so now to do that, I went ahead to mark circumference of my bust divided by 4, and that is 9.5. So after marking that, I just went ahead to insert my armhole curve. So this is what we have here, ladies and gentlemen. So at my under bust point, I marked circumference of my under bust divided by 4, and that is 8 inches. At my half blouse point, I marked circumference of my waist divided by 4, and that is 8 inches. At my hip point, I marked circumference of my hips divided by 4, and that is 11 inches. So at the hem, I stepped my hips measurement down by 1 inch. So at the hem, I marked 10 inches. Okay, remember, if your half blouse is 16 inches, come down by 1 inch because we are going to cut and we are going to join. Okay, so which is what I did here. So I just went ahead to connect all my markings together, and this is what we have. I know you'll be like, Ada, are you marking in different studios? Just know I was moving in between studios, in between sewing arena. Okay, so now the next thing I went ahead to do was to add sewing allowance. Okay, so you can add as much as you want for your sewing allowance. If you want to do 10, if you want to do 20, if you want to do 50, fine. But for me, I added 3 inches sewing allowance for this particular gown. It wasn't really needed, but I did because I was going to shape my zip allowance at the back. Okay, so now after marking the front part, for the back part, just like we did for the front part, I went ahead to draw my starting line. After drawing my starting line, at that point I marked my neck width at 4 inches. So after marking my neck width at 4 inches, I took my neck depth at 1 inch. Remember, in the front we took 4 by 4, that's neck width 4 inches, neck depth 4 inches. But for the back, neck depth is 1 inch, neck width is 4 inches. Okay, so after that, I went ahead to connect all my markings together. You guys, this chalk was fighting with this fabric. It was fighting with this fabric, and I don't know why. Okay, so now the next thing I went ahead to do, you see that my neck width point, I went ahead to extend the line upwards. I did same thing at my shoulder line, and the reason I'm doing this is because I want to add joining allowance to the shoulder line. Okay, so I went ahead to add joining allowance to the shoulder line. After adding joining allowance to the shoulder line, the next thing I went ahead to do, yes, I was looking for my scissors, although I cut it off in the studio, in the editing, but I was looking for my scissors. I went ahead to cut the back part first. So after cutting the back part, you want to make sure that the back, it aligned very well, the neck width aligned very well with the front. Okay, so I also went ahead to cut the neckline for the front. You can see it's well aligned. Okay, so after doing this, I went ahead to hold it down with my office pin so that it doesn't move. Then I just went ahead to cut out my working piece. Okay, so you want to take your time when you're doing this. So I went ahead to cut out my working piece. You guys, like I said, your girl is not feeling very okay, so if my voice sounds funny, okay, just manage it like that. Okay, so I went ahead to cut my shoulder line. After cutting my shoulder line, I went ahead to cut my armhole. Okay, so this is what we have here. Don't forget to notch. So I notched the zip allowance at the back and also the middle and the front. Very important, very important, guys. So now this is the front piece. Now this gown has a joining in the middle. That is why I came down by 1 inch from my original half blouse, because by the time we join, it is going to jump back to my half blouse. So I went ahead to cut it at my half blouse point. That line there, I went ahead to cut it. Now I want the dart in the blouse part and the skirt part to be the same, so I went ahead to mark circumference of my my nipple to nipple point, which is 4 inches. So I went, so there I marked 4 inches. So after marking 4 inches, I placed the blouse on the skirt, held it down with pin so that everything is properly aligned. And you see that place that I marked for the dart, right? See that point I marked for the dart? I went ahead to notch it at the same time, both for the blouse and for the skirt, so that everything is accurate, so that it's not jumping, everything is well aligned. Okay, so now to start sewing this gown, the first thing I went ahead to do was to grab my lining piece, and I used my lining to turn over the neckline. You can put your forcible interface. Me, I added my own forcible interface after I was done joining. Okay, I was not in the mood. So after attaching the lining to the neckline, I went ahead to cut out the outline that the neckline has created. Then I flipped it over and I gave it a very good top stitch. Now the reason you top stitch, I've said it over and over again, ladies and gentlemen, is so that it doesn't puff out. Okay, so for the back part, we're basically going to do same thing. So this is my lining piece. I'm just going to use the lining to turn over the neckline. So I only use the lining to turn over the neckline. The sides, the shoulder line, the hem, I use my hemming gum to hold it down. Me, I like soft life. I don't like to not be top stitching, to not be jumping, not be giving me stress. I don't have that time. So once I turn over the neckline, I use my hemming gum to hold the red side of the outfit down. Okay, so after top stitching and giving it a good press, this is what we have here now for the back part. So after turning over the neckline, like I told you, I used my hemming gum to hold down the shoulder line, the armhole, the zip allowance, and the side. I made sure everything was well relaxed. Okay, so I did this for the 2 pieces of the back part. Okay, so now I've gone ahead to mark out my zip allowance. Okay, so after marking out my zip allowance, the next thing I went ahead to do was to join it. And as you can see, I've shaped it so I can get rid of the zip bulge. Okay, I shaped it so I can get rid of the zip bulge. So now after joining it at the zip allowance, the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark my dart. Okay, so after marking my dart, I just took it back to my sewing machine. Oh, it was already on my sewing machine, so I just went ahead to pick my dart. Okay, if you don't know how to mark out your dart, you don't know how to mark out your blouse dart, your skirt dart, you need a beginner class, and I have a beginner class. Send me a message. Okay, so now after picking my dart, this is what we have here. So just to finish up the back part, we're just going to attach this zip. Okay, I'm just going to attach this zip to the back part. Okay, so I went ahead to attach this zip. If you don't know how to attach zip, I have 2 tutorials on my channel on how to attach zip, so go and watch it. Okay, so now this is the front part, And just like I did for the back, I turned over the neckline, used my hemming gum to hold the armhole, the sides, and the bottom of the blouse. So I've gone ahead to mark the dart for the blouse part. And what I did for the blouse part, I also did it for the skirt part of this front part. I just used hemming gum to hold the whole 4 sides, and I've also gone ahead to mark my dart. So the next thing I went ahead to do was to pick my dart for the skirt part of this gown. I went ahead to pick my dart for the skirt. I also went ahead to pick the dart for the blouse. Okay, so one tip to getting your dart right for the blouse is to pick it from bottom to top. That's for the blouse, not top to bottom. Pick it from the bottom to the top. Okay, so now after sewing my dart, this is what we have here for the blouse part of this front part. This thing is a tongue twister. Okay, so before we go ahead to join, remember, if you look at the picture very well on the thumbnail, it has drapings on it. Okay, so I just grabbed my tool and I started draping it on it. Okay, I wanted it to have this high-low effect. So from the hem there, I marked my underbust. That place you see me that I marked down with my chalk, it was my underbust point. So I just marked that, and I went ahead to use my office pin to secure it together. Okay, so after securing it together, everything is well relaxed. I cut out the excess. You will not cut exactly, you will leave small allowance so that you can top stitch. Okay, so I also went ahead to do same thing for the skirt part of this front part. Okay, so then the first thing I went ahead to do was to mark where I wanted it to start from, and I wanted it to start from 2 inches below, 2 inches from that the top of the skirt. And for the other side, I just marked the length I wanted, so it stopped like around my hip point. I think I came down by 10 inches. Okay, so after doing that, I just used my ruler and I drew a slanted line. So this would be my guide for draping this tool on the Ankara print. Okay, because on the main piece they did it with the fabric itself, but me, I wanted to be, is it different? I wanted to sew it in Ankara, simple and short. Okay, so I just went, you take your time and arrange it very, very well. You take your time and arrange it very well. Make sure it is firm but not too tight, because you know you are going to wear it. Okay, so make sure it's well relaxed as well. So after I draped it the way I wanted, I went ahead to cut out the excess. Then I'm going to top stitch the sides. Okay, so I took it over to my sewing machine and I just went ahead to top stitch the sides. Okay, so I did this for the blouse part for one side. I did it for the left hand side. I also went ahead to do it for the right hand side. Okay, so I did same thing for the skirt as well. You guys, this gown is not difficult to sew. Just understand the workings and you are good to go. Okay, so I just went ahead to top stitch the skirt part and the blouse part, and I cut out the excess because we've top stitched it. Those excess by the side, we don't need it. So this is what we have here for the blouse part, and this is what we have here for the skirt part. So the next thing I went ahead to do now was I grabbed the blouse part of this gown and I placed it on the skirt part, and we're just going to join it in the middle. Do you now see why I said you should come down by 1 inch when you are marking your half blouse? Because by the time you join it, it will jump. So if you cut directly on your half blouse, by the time you join it, it will not be jumping towards your underbust point. Okay, so now I took it over to my sewing machine. You can see how I held it down with pin. All of you that are sewing without pin, good luck. So after joining the top and the bottom, we now have the gown part for the front part. You guys know that a gown is basically a skirt and blouse joined together. Okay, so now this is what we have here for the front part. So I went ahead to grab the back part, placed it on the front part. I've already gone ahead to mark out my measurement. Okay, so I went ahead to mark out my measurement, and I'm just going to join it on the shoulder line and by the sides. Okay, so I took it over to my sewing machine and I joined the shoulder line. Okay, so after joining the first shoulder line, I went ahead to join the second shoulder line. The reason why I take my time to show you guys all these things is so that the beginners here will see and would know how it works. Okay, so now I just went, as I was sewing, I was pushing it down, because of this joining, the front and the back is no longer equal, because of the joining in the middle. Okay, it's no longer equal, so that excess, you are going to cut it out. So me now, when I was cutting my gown length, instead of 40, I cut 42, because by the time I join in the middle for the front, and by the time I cut out this excess and still fold, it will jump back to my original measurement. So do well to add like 2 inches extra to your length, or 3 inches, so that you have something left when you are done doing all these things. Do you understand? The reason why the front and the back is not the same measurement is because we joined the middle of the front. Okay, so I just went ahead to cut it so that it is now the same measurement with the back. Okay, so now after doing that, the next thing I just went ahead to do was to use my hemming gum to seal the bottom. Nothing serious, guys. I used my hemming gum to seal the bottom. I also opened up the slit. Okay, I also opened up the slit. That was just what I did. And yes, so I burnt my fabric because I was busy talking on phone and I wasn't looking at what I was doing. Okay, yeah, that is it. So this is what the bottom part of this gown looks like. Very simple, very straightforward. So now the next thing is to prepare the sleeve for this gown. Okay, so now the first thing I went ahead to do was to grab my sleeve, and this is my sleeve fabric. It's already on a fold, so I went ahead to fold it again. So after folding it again, the next thing I went ahead to do is, see, what I'm marking here is a basic sleeve. If you don't know how to cut a basic short sleeve, I have, I think, 3 detailed tutorials on this channel on how to cut basic sleeve, so you'd want to check it out, or just look at what I'm doing. Maybe you'll figure it out. But I have like a detailed tutorial on how to cut a basic sleeve. Okay, so I just went ahead to draft out my sleeve slope. After drafting my sleeve slope, the next thing I went ahead to do was to cut the sleeve out. Okay, so I went ahead to cut it out. I told you guys, if my voice is sounding dragging, please bear with me. Your girl is going through flu. Okay, so now after cutting out my desired sleeve, this is what we have here. Remember to notch the middle, very important. It will help you, fix the sleeve. So now you can look at, you from the picture, you see that one sleeve is a basic sleeve, the other sleeve is a cold shoulder sleeve. So you want to come down by 1 inch. I came down by 2.5 inches and it was too much, so I had to redo the sleeve. So you now come down by 1 inch. 1 inch. This 2.5 inch here was too much. I had to redo the sleeve. Okay, so now this is the 2 sleeves, and I grabbed my lining because we're going to turn the sleeve over. Okay, so I went over for this, that other one you turn over the hem, but for this one you turn both the top and the bottom. Okay, so I took it over to my sewing machine and I sewed the hem. Then the next thing I went ahead to do was to top stitch it. Okay, very important. Top stitching is very important. Okay guys, so I went ahead to top stitch. After top stitching, I took it out. The next thing I went ahead to do was to do same for the other side. So for this side, I attached the lining to the main piece, flipped it to the other side, gave it a good top stitch. Then I turned it over. I see how I'm turning it. I turned it again and I went ahead to join the bottom. Okay, so after joining the bottom, I took my time, I joined the bottom. So after joining the bottom, this is what we have here. You can top stitch on it. You can use hemming gum to seal it so the lining doesn't move around. Okay, me, I top stitch the top and the bottom. Okay, so now this is what we have here. So now the next thing I went ahead to do, when I was cutting my sleeve, I added 1 inch sewing allowance. So that's the 1 inch I've marked there. So I did same thing for that cold shoulder sleeve and also for this basic sleeve. So I went over to I'm still on my sewing machine, so I did not went to any over. I just took it to where I'm going to join it. I took it to where I was going to join it and I just sewed the 2 layers together on 1 inch sewing allowance that I added when I was cutting. Okay, so these are the 2 sleeves, the cold shoulder sleeve and the basic sleeve. So the first thing I went ahead to do was to place them on wherever I wanted them to be. Then I secured it with my office pin. So I secured the sleeve to the gown with office pin, and I just took my time to attach the sleeve. When you're watching joining tutorials, you'll be like, oh, they are so fast when they are attaching the sleeve. My dear, this video is sped up. It is not it is not fast. Okay, so now for those cold shoulder sleeve, I've gone ahead to attach it, but you can see that one part of the shoulder is still exposed. So I grabbed my bias tape, my black bias tape, and I used it to turn over that part. You can do this with your fabric, but me, I prefer to do this with my bias tape, so I just did my bias tape. So I didn't want to sew on that part of the shoulder, so I just went ahead to fold it, and I used hemming stitches to hold down the bias. Okay, you can top stitch, you can do whatever you want, but me, I held it down with hemming stitches. That's needlework. I used my needle and thread. If your sewing machine can do that for you, good and fine. So after sewing it with my needle and thread, this is what we have here. You can see how neat and beautiful it is. No plenty drama. Neatness is all we need. Okay, so after doing all this, ladies and gentlemen, this is what the gown looks like. Take your time to always arrange the drape whenever you wear it, because me, I didn't really arrange my own well. That's when it's moving around your body. So this is what the gown looks like. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe. If you're watching from Facebook, make sure you share, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys, and thank you for watching. Bye.